Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Payne. Welcome to another episode of Coffee and Crypto. We've got Miles, head of research at Blu Ocean Guild, with us
Hello.
again today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
There's a lot we discussed prior to this to kind of figure out what we wanted to talk about because there's so many different things going on right now. And I think what we both agreed on was talking about play to earn, the state of fun factor versus earnings, because there's a lot of things that have kind of come
That's
to
a
light.
gigantic ethics debate that everybody is having right now.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I was doing a little bit of background research on a new network called the SUI network that just launched about 20 days ago, 21 days ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a game therein that caught my interest because it was like an arena fighting game, which you don't see a lot of in the play to earn industry. And I was like, this is really exciting. We've been waiting for a fighting game to show up.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm looking at it, this is, I caught wind of it from some article that claimed that it was going to be on the SUI network. So I followed that article to their main website. And on their main website, they have a whole tab that's dedicated to anti-NFTs and why they've chosen, after a lot of deliberation, to not include an NFT system or any Web3 systems in their game.
Oh, interesting. So they almost changed their whole model.
Yeah, after a bunch of research, they decided that it's not the way to go, and their reasoning was that having NFTs and having any sort of play to earn functionality or any sort of blockchain functionality will inherently change the nature of the game to have stakes when a game like that would originally not have stakes.
That's
and
true.
That will change the mentality of the players.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is this is very, very vocally communicated by the Web2 community. That's where they're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, Web3 gaming is really just gambling and it's not real gaming.
Well, yeah, there's an argument for like games not supposed to be an investment tool and, all those things. And it's kind of taking away from the original what games were, which were entertainment, a way to decompress or de-stress. And then all of a sudden you add this financial element and it becomes very serious.
It becomes too real.
Yeah, but that's okay. It's just pick your camp, right? Like, and I kind of learned that through the last year and a half. I think I'm a really good example of this. There was one point I was even joking to some of my friends. I'm like, oh, I'll never play a Web 2 game again. I'm just Web 3, it's the future. It's all I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't the case. New games came out, new popular titles on PlayStation 5 and things that I was genuinely interested in. And yeah, it was a completely different mindset. If I wanted to relax and chill, I'd play a Web 2 game.
That's true.
Web 3 was work, but it also made me realize, like, yes, I was enjoying the work I was doing, but especially because we created a business around it, the guild
yes.
and the community.
That's a big thing.
Everything was financially oriented. So if a game didn't have good earning potentials or it wasn't something that was netting us revenue, we didn't get involved with it. So really, it was a monetarily incentivized system completely. So that's kind of opened my eyes up too, like especially with that CoinGecko report we talked about on a couple episodes ago that really showed all the clickers are still the ones being played.
Yeah, that people are still playing and looking at clicker games as their gamified game of choice, as opposed to all the games that are coming out lately that look more like games.
Yeah, but
and don't have clear tokenomics necessarily.
And people want this is kind of the impression I'm kind of getting from people. They want a game that they can lose themselves in, like play a lot, but also have the insane earning potentials that some of the clickers did that we've seen during last time. We don't have that yet. And maybe we won't.
It's
right?
Yeah, the question, this begs the question, if at one time maybe we thought there was one camp where gamers were just trying to figure things out, and now perhaps that we've realized that there are two camps, a camp of gamers that don't want earnings and don't want tokenification and all that stuff, and then a camp of gamers that do, and what those two different genres of games might look like. And I don't remember exactly the name of the game that I saw this, but on their website, they were saying something about how Web3 games, and intrinsically, because of the way that they're designed, are more along the lines of gambling games, such as blackjack or poker, as opposed to a regular traditional game where there are no stakes, because there is stakes.
I agree with that. I absolutely
kind of agree with that too.
Yeah, and I mean, we can look at the UK's legislation or regulation on crypto, and that's kind of what they're trying to do is lump it into. And I'm like, that's great. There's tax breaks, like there's benefits for that, but I also think it would put the average person getting into this space starting off on the right foot, because that's one of the things that we talk about at having to educate people a lot when they come into the space is don't bet the farm, don't invest money that you're not comfortable losing.
That's right.
And a lot of us learn that lesson the hard way.
That's true.
Right. And then now we're just in an echo chamber trying to tell other people. So if it was more positioned as, yes, this is gambling, that's the nature of this game, great. I know what I'm signing up for.
Well, I also have a counter argument to these guys.
Me too.
These guys were talking about their game being so good and being so combo centric, and so I don't remember the name of the game, that it was poised to kill fighting games like Super Smash Bros. Melee. And a big part of the Super Smash Bros. Melee economy or ecosystem in the past was people playing in tournaments for money,
Yep.
and people playing each other in money matches for money.
That's
and
right.
If you want to tell me that that's not gambling, and you want to tell me that traditional gamers, such as those who were playing Smash Bros. Melee over the coming years, last 5 to 8 years,
Yeah.
That they weren't gambling when they were doing that, or that they don't have a desire to make money and game at the same time, I think that's a lie.
Me too.
That's
and
what
I mean,
I
look at streamers. That's the whole intention with streaming.
But my other takeaway is that there is definitely a huge disconnect between the traditional gamer connecting to this, like, I guess you could call it esports focused, almost competitive focused, high level play of games, because that level of play of games will always exist, whether it be in the Web3 space or in the traditional space.
Yeah, and there's
You know
always
what I
those
mean?
two camps.
When the next Super Smash Brothers game comes out, whether it has NFTs or not, people are going to learn to play it
That's right.
competitively.
Yeah.
So I don't see why there can't be a system in place in the background that's not intrusive, that helps people to retain their value and ownership after they've played a game.
That's a really good comparison, because you're right. Pick any game. Let's say Call of Duty, for example. You've got the casuals, then you've got the competitive, and there's that divide, but it doesn't take away from either.
Well,
Right.
the other thing is, we think about games that are even more simple than that. What's that game? Fortnite. There are people who play Fortnite competitively, and because there are people who play Fortnite competitively, and it has so much attention, that's part of the reason why Fortnite skins have such a value in the first place. And so those kids who play Fortnite just to gather skins and eventually potentially maliciously sell their account for $700 so they can buy lollipops. I mean,
Right.
that niche would not exist without there being a competitive upper end, like people who stand to benefit from buying those skins from that kid and then
Yep.
go somewhere to use them. They wouldn't have value if people didn't care about them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all that I think Web3 gaming is trying to do, well, real pure Web3 gaming is trying to do, is to give the users of those things the ownership of those things.
Yes.
And decentralize it all, instead of it all being under the umbrella of like Blizzard Entertainment, for example. And then when you find your amazing Zod rune, well, it's Blizzard's property, so you can't sell it to your friend.
And I think a good question that everybody should ask themselves in this space is, am I doing this for financial opportunity, or am I doing this for fun, or is there some balance in between?
Well, the other thing is that I think a lot of people need to ask themselves, especially if they were around in the past for things like Warcraft 3's, sorry, not Warcraft 3, Diablo 3's Real Money Auction House.
Yes, I remember
That was an absolute craze among traditional gamers. There was a
Yeah.
huge amount of money that went through that Real Money Auction House. It was the first time.
It was the first time I
and the
made
last
money
time
playing
that
the
anybody ever actually, got to see that in
Yeah.
like a real Blizzard game, and that it somehow made it past the radar and past regulatory scrutiny and everything, and just made it.
Till they shut it down.
You know what I mean? They shut it down pretty fast because it was so crazy, but a lot of people liked it and were not happy when it got shut down, or you know what I mean, were let down when it got shut down.
No, that was a great
And-
example. I mean, for me with Diablo 3 auction house, I got to a point in the beginning I was making about $100 a day. And I remember being a lot younger. I think my son had just been born, and I was like, oh my God, I don't have to go to work. If I can do $100 a day, I could pay my bills. But what really quickly happened within about 2 weeks is it went down to about $20 a day, because you had people farming the crap out of it. And there's a really good article I read that kind of explained it. They were talking about how people in other countries with lower income, who have much, much lower wages, the $20 a day was fantastic for them to earn. But here in Canada, that's not a livable
Okay,
wage
well,
to
my
me.
question to that person would be this: what if there was a limited amount of liquidity inside that system?
That's right.
Because that's generally the case with a lot of crypto games.
Or a
And so if
limited
a crypto
amount of
game,
equipment.
so suppose you made World of Warcraft and you made it in a break just the same as World of Warcraft, but there was a way to take the gold and or your items from the game if you wanted to and tokenify them outside and then put them on a marketplace
I
for
think
somebody else to
that's-
buy and then put them back into the game to use.
I think that's a
That
clever way
would
to do it.
solve the problem of people being able to move their game value between each other legally, but also maintain the strictly game nature of the actual game. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you just have to have security. Like, you'd have to be a little bit more hardcore on making sure things can't be bugged
Yeah.
or hacked or glitched.
But the other thing about that is that you would have a game that runs just the same way as a regular game runs. What that means is that all the day-to-day and in-game and transactions would happen the way that they do in a regular game, not
Yeah.
on chain. And what that also means is that you wouldn't need to worry about how much strain this would put on the chain necessarily, because the chain would only ever actually be used if somebody was like, okay, well, I want to go and take my Zod root out and sell it on D2JSP. So the way that you do that then in this sense would be to take the thing, and then there would be an external, some sort of a thing that would off ramp it either into an NFT or into crypto to then go trade to some exchange and to your friend who would then
Oh yeah, that's
on-ramp
interesting.
it
It's
back
almost
into
like
their
you can
game.
mint the NFT as you take it out,
Yeah, but exactly,
and
and
then
they would
someone
be
will
separate.
burn it when they put it in.
That's right, and it would be completely separate. It would separate the game itself from the FI part. You know what I mean?
Be able to get around like getting on Sony, Nintendo.
And so yeah, that's exactly
all
it. And it would
those
also
things
get
too.
around the whole like, I don't know if we're going to be able to put in our actual items, is because I don't know if the game is going to be pay to win or not, because the game will only be pay to win if people are interested in it.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to. If people are interested enough that they want to pay $200 to get the jump on that other guy, that means you've made a really, really good game.
Yeah.
So ultimately, you know, it's a success one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm not against pay to win. I think it could promote a game's health and liquidity and ecosystem quite well. But of course, there's a balance thing that you want to put there. Like, I totally get it. If you're a new player and you're staring at a guy who put $20,000 into the game and there's nothing you can do about it, that might be frustrating. But there's so many games already like that.
On the
Like,
flip side, I mean, I played a good example would be when I was younger. I played a classic World of Warcraft server that was private, where people could donate to get their stuff and to get ahead. And a lot of people viewed that as pay to win, or you could just not play the game properly, play the game really well, and still compete with that person. Do you know what I mean? And I was one of those people who I just really enjoyed playing World of Warcraft. So at that time, so I got to the max level really quick, because it was it wasn't about leveling, it was more of like a PvP and fighting bosses type server. And then all of a sudden, after about a month of work, I'm beside that guy who spent $400 or $1,000, whatever, I don't even know how much they spent to donate to get all their stuff. And like, sure, they got there sooner than I did, but I was able to get to where they were, and because of my ability and skill in the game, I was able to even outpace some of those
Clash
people.
of Clans is a really good example of that too. Whenever a new town hall would come out, the people in the competitive scene, you want to max your base as quickly as possible in your troops, because you get an advantage in the competitive scene in the wars. So people would dump thousands of dollars, $5,000-$10,000 to max their base first. But people who didn't, it might take them 6 months or 7 months, but they'd still get there. And yes, there was this bit of an advantage, but it was still possible. And we see it in so many microtransaction games. I mean, the Diablo Legends, and like, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just do it in a way that it's not going to upset and make it hard for the new player entering to feel like there's just no way they can compete.
Well, that's exactly it, because there have also been situations where I've been on, in playing games like that, where there was so much of this going on that the average person who just wanted to start would literally have to play the game for 6 trillion gajillion years to catch up to the person who's now got this power creep from whatever it might be. Well, so there's a balance to be had there,
even
right?
a lot of the DeFi clickers were kind of like that. There was this.
But my point is
entry.
that always when people were entering these games, they were looking for the angle to earn the most, to do the best, so that they could get there the fastest without having to spend the money or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? So people were already sort of, I guess, like trying to be as productive as they could have been then, but they were just doing it with non-real assets and not getting any value out of it.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the no stakes versus stakes like argument. You know what I mean? That the stakes can be optional.
And I think that's a good way to kind of think about it moving forward. That, like, Ni no Kuni, Crossworlds was the first one that, or Crossroads. I think I'm mixing.
No, Crossworlds is right.
Crossworlds, okay, yeah. I think they did a good job, because when they launched their game, they didn't say anything about it being crypto. And had all the press release and the articles. They're like, oh, new Ni no Kuni game available on the App Store, all that stuff. I'm like, great. And then you go to their website and you find this Web3 section. And it's like, oh, okay, awesome. What is this? And you dive into it. You're like, oh, the Terraria token. And like, okay, this actually, the Aspirate looks good. But then you get into the game and there's no explanation, no tutorials. It's a Web 2 game. And unless you're aware of that, when you tap on the token or go to like the bottom of the settings, there's this wallet thing that you can do it there. I really like that, because the game still has a huge player base. Crypto is not the primary focus of it, but there is still opportunity for earnings through people being at the high level and doing the high raids. Yeah. And it's this kind of off to the side thing. And that to me was a success for adoption, because people who were interested in Web3 were also playing it. People who were interested in Ni no Kuni were playing it because they didn't even know that there was Web3.
Yeah.
And I just think they did a good job at how they released that and how they presented it, where they weren't necessarily trying to hide it, but they also weren't like, yes, it's a Web3 game.
They weren't throwing it in your face.
Yeah,
That's
they
right.
didn't claim it was a crypto game.
No, it was a game first, and then there was Web3.
That's right. And kind of like what you were saying about maybe having a game with all the real world economy and everything, just like a game, like take World of Warcraft, but then your World of Warcraft gold, you could off ramp into a token and then do it outside. Or kind of like you were mentioning about how
And then the last thing,
burning an NFT or minting an NFT
yeah,
to take it out.
there'd be a limited amount of those. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like if let's say we've got World of Warcraft and there's 1 million players and between those 1 million players there's X amount of gold that runs around on average. Well, suppose that there was a limit to how much tokenified gold there could be so that we could retain the value of gold on a marketplace or whatever, so that it never goes down to zero. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
That's a thing that's possible.
It is. And it depends on how popular a game
And all of
is,
that would
too.
have to be hard coded from the get go too.
Yeah, and I can
figured out from
see
the
some
beginning.
security challenges and like, because if it's not on chain in the game, there could be more opportunity to tamper with it.
Well, but the last thing is, and the most important thing is that once a game gets popular, these things would have value.
Yes.
And if a game loses its popularity, and every game eventually has a lifetime and loses its popularity, these things are likely to lose most of their value.
Yeah.
And that's just natural with games. Do you know what I mean? That's just the way that games work.
I mean, companies you could almost kind of compare in the same way, different life cycle. But I mean, I can't remember the argument, but all companies eventually perish. Even Google will be gone one day. Even Microsoft will be gone one day. I don't know how this was figured out, but there's this real good book on it, and there's a formula, and they talk
A
all
formula
about it.
for the life cycle of a company.
Yeah,
That's
right.
Yeah,
And
it
something like
exists.
50 years for like the best companies on average. For the best, like Forbes top 10 or 50. And games are like, when you look at the different genres, that matters too. Like MMORPGs tend to have a longer shelf life, 8 to 10 years, if they're done right. But I mean, we've seen other games like flash in the pan kind of style that just were great, and then within a year it was like nobody's playing.
That's
Or
true.
the opposite, like No Man's Sky, came out. There's so many issues. It was kind of like not a very
like
successful
flopped
launch,
almost, and then they sort of worked on it really heavily, and then it became a hit.
and now it's still
Same as
growing.
Final Fantasy 14. It
That's
came
right.
out originally. The original version of it flopped. It was miserable. They fired their whole team. They made a whole new team. They reworked the game, and now it's one of the most popular games, MMOR games on the market right now.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see like that. I think there's going to be more of a drive and a push for these game development companies to keep the game alive, but then it's still just about popularity and how much liquidity is in the system. I mean, that's why we've seen Axie get so crazy. It was
That's
because
true.
there was so much new money and new investors entering the system that people were able to extract value from the play to extract, essentially, to pay
Yeah.
their bills, to live.
Right.
And we all seen what happened in the Philippines with it. It was a really inspiring time.
I mean, if you really think about it from a macro point of view, like all that really happened was they made a game, and instead of all the money or the proceeds of that game going directly to the people who own the game or who created the game, it was distributed based on gameplay a little bit. That's all that happened. You know what I mean? And sure, it wasn't fully sustainable, and sure, it was a little bit almost incendiary at times. But
Yes.
it's something that's a precedent that's never been set before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Except for with things like the real money auction house with Warcraft or with Diablo 3 and things of that nature, which haven't been allowed to slide very often. And this is just basically the first sort of time in history where we have a system that will allow things like that to slide. But the thing is that I see both sides of the argument. Yes, I understand the changing of the nature of a game from a game of no stakes to a game with stakes. But I also see the other side of the argument of when somebody plays a game for 1,000 hours and becomes a master at it, should there not be value for them to be getting from that? Because
Or
the
to be able to
person-
sell your account and move on to another game.
Yeah.
Because think of all the save files we have and all the progress in all the other games. They're essentially valueless when we move on. Unless you do some illegal, against terms of service is what I should say, not necessarily illegal, breaking the terms of service and trying to sell the account on a third-party market. And I mean, there's tons of that. I mean, WoW Gold, you can buy WoW Gold, you can buy Clash of Clans accounts. All the
Well, a
stuff
great
is against
example would
terms
be
of service.
there's a website called D2JSP that
Yeah.
was made entirely sort of around a forum currency that you could use to trade for Diablo 2 items inside of Diablo 2. That was the way that they got around being able to trade items outside of Diablo 2's ecosystem.
And I mean, now we're just seeing that all in
and then-
application in blockchain.
Yeah, basically, it got to a point where people were stalking, where we're farming this forum gold, because then when they knew when the next season of Diablo 2 came out, they would have enough gold to buy the set that they wanted to start their run. And it's like,
That's right.
does that not give that person an advantage over the other person who doesn't know about this whole system? Wouldn't it be nice if that was all included into the game so that everybody could access it?
Yeah.
And is there not a way to make that possible and profitable without affecting their gameplay? It's clear that there is, because it already exists. It's D2JSP. How do we fix it so it's fair? How do we fix it so it's like secure? That's all those are the questions that we're asking right now.
Yeah, and it brings me
The
back
problem
to
with that is that there's, like we said, with the top 10 list and the first 3 on the top 10 list were all clickers. We were always going to have that party of people who are trying to make financial games and clicker games and earnings focused games, and then the people who respond only to earnings who are going to jump on that wagon.
And I think that's the wagon that's going to be jumped on again with the bull run. I mean, it's great to see these fun factor games being played. And there's a few for sure that we have our close eye on that we feel has the potential for both, but we've still yet to see that.
Well, that's what a confidence rating really is. Even if I give something a perfect confidence rating, that just means that I'm confident that it will succeed, or that whoever wrote the rating is confident that it will succeed.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that everything is perfect and we know everything, because we don't. This is all untested waters, right? So we're just we're trying to make the next leap in sort of game economy, I suppose you might say. But game economy is not a new thing. We've all been experiencing game economy since we were kids.
Yep.
And we know that it works, and we know that it's stable, because games wouldn't have functioned if it wasn't so.
I think that's why it's so exciting to kind of see this whole space move and develop.
Yeah, we know that there is an answer. We just don't know what it is yet.
That's right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. That was a great conversation, Miles.
Yeah, thanks for having
your
us.
insight on it. This is something that, like you said, a lot of people are kind of discussing more roundtable style about this. These are the kind of questions we need to have as an industry to figure out, do we separate this? Do we just have the financial tools and the clickers, and then the fun factor games with maybe hidden crypto components, or should it just be fully crypto? Like, there is so many questions, and we're going to see different development teams and different projects, and we already have kind of taking their own little takes and angles on it. So it's going to be really exciting over the next year in this industry, just kind of seeing and being able to play and get our hands on a lot more of these models to try and see these tests and how they go. Like, are we still going to see the 2 token model everywhere? Is breeding just dead? These are a lot of questions that I'm going to be curious to talk about.
Well, that's true. I mean, even nowadays, like when I look at a game and the first thing it's like, okay, great, we can get these NFTs, collect them, and then breed them, and then and I always think the first thing that pops into my head, inflationary.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? So That's a big problem.
It is. Well, thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Of course, if you're not subscribed to the channel, it really helps us out. Please do. And look forward to seeing you on our next Coffee and Crypto. Until then, cheers.